Why, hello all, and welcome to How to Set Boundaries with Clients, our webinar for today. I'm Sandra Mall, and I will be the host of your webinar. I'm also the program advisor here at Coaching Out of the Box. Our intention for this webinar today is to provide you with some new tools on setting boundaries with your clients, as well as to get to know us a little bit better here at Coaching Out of the Box. The chat box is open, so please feel free to add any questions or comments that you may have in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. And just to let you know, we will be sending out follow-up communication after the webinar today that will include the slides from the webinar, as well as a link to the recording. So as mentioned, I am the program advisor here at Coaching Out of the Box, and I speak with individuals every day who have questions about coaching, about our programs, about the ICF credentialing process. And I'm happy to touch base with any one of you if you do have any questions. You can see that my calendar link is at the bottom of the screen here. And so please feel free to reach out at any time. I'd like to introduce you all to my wonderful co-host today, one of our amazing coach facilitators here at Coaching Out of the Box. And this is Carolyn Hamilton-Kuby.
Thanks so much, Sandra, and welcome everyone. It's a delight to be here with you. Again, as Sandra shared, my name is Carolyn Hamilton-Kuby, and I'm in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. I am the owner of Morningstar Center for Engagement, and I am a certified executive coach, a professional certified coach, and a mentor coach as well. I have been aligned with Coaching Out of the Box, this great company, for 10 years now, and it's been as a licensed trainer, and also been involved in delivering virtual programs with them as a coach facilitator for the last couple of years. So a long history with this fabulous company, and it's just wonderful to be here today and with amazing Sandra Mall. Okay.
Thank you, Carolyn. So what we're going to do today, we are going to talk about boundaries. Carolyn's going to walk us through the definition of boundaries. We're going to introduce you to what we call an IRI boundary model, for those of you that are not familiar with it. And we're also going to chat about 6 ways that you can set and preserve your boundaries. If you have any questions, we'll make time for that as well. Just keep popping them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to pass this over to Carolyn again.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay, so as you can see on the screen there, boundaries, you know, the definition, there are lots of definitions. The one we have here is that it's the behavior we hold other people to while they're in our presence, and it's to protect ourselves from damaging situations. Oftentimes, people can view boundaries as being restrictive. That said, it can be the healthiest element to work and life, quite honestly. And so we're going to explore the aspects of this, even more so how to set and maintain boundaries along the way. When people kind of overstep, like that lovely little flower is just starting to go over the fence. Okay, Sandra. Thank you. So, wondering, who taught you about setting boundaries? When you think about it. Maybe share in the chat. And if you could maybe share a couple of them with me, Sandra.
Certainly can.
Thank you.
So some of the answers coming up: mom and dad, parents, teachers, family members, children, older siblings, business partners, school, husbands, spouses, past employers. We have a life enrichment seminar in there, professors, society, friends. Those are some of the big ones coming up.
Thank you. And I'm seeing, I didn't realize I would have access to the chat. On some webinars, I don't, Sandra. So I'm cool to check it out. If you could watch the questions, that would be great. But the chat, when I throw it out, I can do that. Thanks so much. And yeah, so what I'm hearing and seeing is that it's, you know, from a lot of different places. And that said, you know, when you think about growing up in the formative years, oftentimes, many of us were not really taught about setting or establishing boundaries. And in fact, maybe some of you, I know it's the case for me, have been taught that being a good girl or boy is really important and not to make waves. And so that can really, it may be set with the best of intentions at the time. However, that kind of message can set a mindset that involves some limiting beliefs. And it makes me wonder, to what degree might that limiting belief or, not setting up boundaries hold us back from trusting ourselves to protect ourselves from others, their actions and their comments. I don't know about you, but very often a lot of us can get our energy around making boundaries in the midst of anger, when something's going wrong. And at that point, okay, enough is enough. The boundary is set. And that may be, very valuable to do in that timeline. However, my sense and my experience, quite honestly, is that being proactive around setting boundaries early can really help eliminate, reduce, and de-escalate conflicts versus dealing with them in the moment of charge. Can we have the next slide, Sandra? Oh, look at that lovely picture. There you go. Setting boundaries and maintaining them really can contribute to a healthy relationship. And one, see that lovely little seat is straddling the fence on both sides. There's room for both. And so absolutely, negotiation and compromise are part of enhancing and establishing, maintaining healthy relationships. There's a place for those, negotiating, compromising. And it depends on how important the boundary that you're setting is, though. For some boundaries, they may be deal breakers, and you're the best judge of that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so you saw that visual, it was like shattered glass. What's being violated when a boundary is crossed? I mean, it can be a major issue depending on how solid that boundary is to you. If someone crosses that line, and typically the sort of aspects that are impacted are core values, standards, and emotional needs. When you think of core values, what are some examples of core values that pop up as boundaries that might be crossed? And of course, core values being, in essence, who we are at the core. What ignites us as our authentic self? Jim's saying integrity. Yeah, Andrea is saying respect. Chantal, honesty. Doug is trust, honesty. Yeah, Annette, respect, inclusion. Mariko, honesty. You've got it. These are things that are of key importance to us. Yeah, Lana's got a lot there. Family, respect, respecting ourselves and our proper others and our property, integrity, responsibility, inclusion, personal space. Lovely. Yeah, self-respect, Carol says. And so how about standards? Let's visit that. And standards being, what we hold ourselves and others to in terms of, expressing and upholding, where we draw the line based on those values. What would be an example of standard? Tammy, ethics, yes. Ellie, language, name calling, right? And Carol says language used. Alana, ICF for coaches. Yes. Kathy, accuracy, truthfulness. Yep. Andrea, responsiveness. Doug says respect. Diane, integrity. Patricia, quality, time. Yes, you've got it. And Annette, someone expecting perfection when timeline only supports workable solution. Oh yeah, there you go. Thank you. Lovely examples. And if we envision, say, a core value of mine, kind of bringing those elements together, a core value of mine is honoring, respecting, and listening, being listened to. So standard that I have that flows from that core value is not being interrupted. The lines crossed when somebody interrupts. I really bump up against that. And so that's just an example. It's like where the line is drawn in the sand, and it typically that standard flows from a core value. The emotional needs part is around emotional sensitivity in order that we need in order to feel a sense of stability. And so flowing from that, an example would be, well, what might be an example? Let me hear from you again. What surfaces up for you emotional needs as a boundary? Something you feel that, you need on an emotional level, a boundary you set that gives you a sense of stability. Anything pop up? Okay. Seeing lots here. Yeah, social connection, safety, space to process, respect, nice language, feedback, being listened to, being valued, being respected and valued, respect, judgment free, valued and understood, tone of voice, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Wow, yes. Consideration dismissed. Yeah, thank you. And we've got more tone of voice, open and honest discussion, bias declared, respect, trust, inclusivity. Thank you. Feedback. Yeah. And an example for me is, acknowledgement. That's very important to me. And I guess that probably stems from that core value of honoring and being respectful. And so being seen, heard, and understood, super important. And so those aspects, they're precious. And so it's really important to protect those and ensure that we not only establish boundaries around them, but maintain the boundaries around them. Could we have the next slide, Sandra? Thank you. Okay, some of you may be familiar with the IRI boundary model, and I want to give a shout out to Amy Rupert, who developed this. And so it's quite simple and yet profound. And as you can see on the slide, the first step in it involves informing. If a boundary that you have established has been crossed, first step would be to inform the person importantly, clearly, and free of charge what has been violated, why it's an issue, and using I statements. And the second part of this model involves requesting that the behavior obviously shift, and also sharing how the benefit, if you will, for you both. So it's not about finger pointing. It's not about coming into this with a charge. And that's the advantage of being proactive around establishing boundaries and having a conversation in the moment, really being grounded in and centered in one's best self when you're bringing the communication to the table, so as not to escalate it, because these situations, when boundaries are crossed, can become high-level conflict situations. So an example I have for you, and it's in a coaching context actually, in a coaching session, I had contracted with an individual who was looking for executive coaching. And in the intake session, when we were going through the written agreement, and I was asking if there were any questions, I was explaining what coaching isn't, and the process. She indicated that she was actually thinking of becoming a coach, and she started researching about it. So she was really interested in engaging in coaching. And so that was cool. She had, set out her goals, long-term goals in advance, and signed the agreement, made sure everything was clear. And then we started the coaching contract. And the first session went pretty much like a typical coaching conversation. The second one, however, started out with her sharing what she wanted to be coached on. And then when we were going into exploration and discovery, I throw out a question and she really wasn't responding. She wasn't engaged. I sensed it and I saw it in her energy and her nonverbals and her responses. And so I would ask a question, throw out a question to her, an open question that was responding to what she just shared. And her response would be something like, maybe write something down. And then she'd give a quick answer. And she did that quite a bit. And, it was a new relationship and I didn't want to hamper trust. I was building trust and I thought, okay, this is not the way she showed up in the first session. Maybe it's an off day. I don't know. So I just worked around it, worked with it, and worked through it. The third session, however, same behavior surfaced. And so at one point I just, asked if we could pause the coaching in the moment. And she said, sure. And I said, may I share an observation? She said, sure. And my informing her went something like, I'm noticing that my style, my coaching style, and the coaching process seem to be observed versus the two of us exchanging in a dynamic coaching process. Am I on base with that? And she said, yes, you are. Oh, I'm sorry. I shared that I want to be a coach. And, I'm just so interested in finding out like what it is and what kind of questions you ask. So I'm kind of writing them down too in the moment and just watching how you do it. And so I said, okay, I hear you. And that said, just revisiting the agreement that this is really for executive coaching and to help you get where you want to go to that big goal. And if the requirement has shifted, I know that you're interested in becoming a coach. You shared that, maybe coaching is not for you at this point. Maybe it's more finding out about coach training. Maybe it's finding a mentor or consultant around aspects of coaching. In the purest form of coaching, and adhering to the ICF code of ethics, it's about staying in coach mode. If, coaching is really what you want. She said, oh yes, absolutely. I really do want coaching. And I'm clear about that. I'm just really in my head. I'm just analyzing a lot. And so that's where I'm at. And so I said, well, I've got a request for you going forward, since you shared you want to be coached. And that request is when you notice you're analyzing and getting your head in a lot, that you shift into heart space. How's that sound? She said, absolutely. Thank you. And so we went on and it worked. Never a problem since. And so that's a quick example of framing it with informing and then requesting in a coach-like way and using I versus you. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Any questions? Okay, Kelly, yes. So it helped to see that I just paused that conversation. I had to. I mean, I was in my head, like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? She doesn't seem to be connecting. I think she's observing me, and she was observing me. Oh yeah, Elizabeth, feeling frustrated about coming in. Oh, not to worry at all. Now this is kind of interesting. I want to throw out there because I the way I positioned it was as, I have an observation. It's okay to share it, right? I made it invitational. What if she'd said no? I mean, typically clients don't. What would I have done if she'd said no? What do you think? What could I have done? What comes to mind? Revisit goals, express my concern. Yeah, if she doesn't want to go along with the agreement, she could choose to end the coaching, or you could, right? Go back to the contract, revisit the contract. You got it. Ask another question that addresses the issue, Tammy. Recontract. Yeah, change the observation to a question. You got it about goals, Shelley. There you go. Lots of ways to deal with that. Lots of ways to deal with that. And brilliant, brilliant responses. And let's see. Annette says, to be in full service to you, I'm curious about what is going on with you during our dialogue. There you go. And so we can frame it in a very coach-like way. And it could very well be that the person doesn't realize that they are crossing a boundary. And in my experience, most times that's the case. Okay, thank you. And let's see. Nellie's got skip to a request or invite, maybe. If we launch right into the request without warming it up a little bit, it may hamper trust. So we've got to be careful around that. But we know in the moment as coaches, right? And Lana's saying it's neat how many times we observe behavior that we think is inappropriate, strange. Typically, it's something that makes sense when we learn about their perspective. You got it. People have different boundaries, Elizabeth says. Yeah, I didn't see that as crossing a boundary. What boundary was she crossing? Oh, great point, Andrea. And so it was you know what, I chose it because it really does speak to this model. The boundary that could have been crossed was that it was really clear what coaching was and wasn't. And so not engaging fully in the conversation and just observing me, if she was showing up just to observe my skills and my style and the process, that's not coaching. And so it was from that perspective. I hope that helps, does it, Andrea? Straight up, Juanita says, ask what her behavior is saying, what she thinks her behavior is saying. Use that to move forward toward her goals. And I'm glad that clarified. And thanks for putting it out there. For sure, if anything I share is not clear, let me know. Okay, in the interest of time, I think we'll just move on to the next slide, which is the third element. This is the last I in the IRRI boundaries model, and that's to insist. And so it didn't happen with this person, but however, if it had continued in another session, then it would have been a matter of revisiting the conversation, just kind of reminding of the conversation we had and building in some consequence around, if it happens again. And of course, depending on the boundary that's crossed, sometimes the insistence is upfront. I mean, if it's a deal breaker. However, this is assuming that the person has said, oh gosh, sorry, it won't happen again. And then all of a sudden it does happen again. So it's reminding and indicating, and insisting, being really clear about the boundary and that it's set, right? And I'm seeing that Elizabeth saying, insist, this is what I'm missing. And Sandra feels that insist step is the hardest. Yeah. What is it that can be the most challenge around insisting? Shelley says, hard to make an insist without it sounding like an ultimatum. Elizabeth, fear of appearing pushy or mean. Yeah. Not being a good girl. Ooh, that could, imagine that. Imagine us shifting out of that belief. Yeah. Fear of, that you feel that you have to define your own personal boundary. Feeling like pushing our own agenda instead of the client. What our behavior of insisting may say to others. Okay. Raises conflict. if conflict is uncomfortable for you, and it is for many, it is for me, that may be enough for us to avoid it. Maybe it is an ultimatum. Woo, exactly, it could be. How many times do we ask? How important is that boundary to us, right? Coaching, we are client-centered, and assisting moves from that difficult in the relationship. Yeah, great responses here. Would depend on the breach. Yeah, it is a deal breaker. Is it or not? Assertive and or aggressive. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a moment. Kareem, can you role play what it would have sounded like in my example? For sure. Be prepared for a reaction, defensiveness. Okay. And so the insisting might have gone like, let's say her name was Sue. And so Sue, if we can pause again, I want to just revisit the conversation we had last time around staying in coach mode and in alignment with the agreement. And I'm noticing again that it seems that we're out of that. And so if you're noticing, I'm kind of using we versus you as we set it up, as we start the conversation. And if she said something like, oh yeah, I'm back in head mode again, it might even be that, would it be helpful? Would it be helpful to be coached on how to shift out of head mode? I mean, we're there to help people, right? However, it might be that it's not that. And so it might be, I'm wondering if you might be better served with mentoring or a coaching program or a consultant, and that maybe coaching, it's not the best match right now at this point in time. Okay, that's true. I really am. It's not fair to you. The person might agree, or they might say, no, I really do want coaching. So then the insistence would be, and it can be a gentle insistence, direct, clear, complete. Okay, so for us to continue, I just need agreement between us that we stay in coach mode, because I want to stand in service for you to help you move forward on your goal. And it's not serving you if we're not in a dynamic coaching exchange. And then leave it at that. And then if it happens again, then it is the discussion around, okay, this isn't, so we've visited this conversation a few times. So my sense is that coaching isn't the best match, or perhaps I'm not the best match for you as a coach. And so what might work, given that your passion for finding out more about coaching? Something like that. How's that sound? That's off the top of my head because it went fine, but that's a possibility. Yeah, Doug says, if you're in a leadership position, I coach that you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Right on, Doug. Miriam, yeah, we can't help our clients if we feel undervalued or compromised. And Carol, would I terminate the relationship? If the person, absolutely, that would be, if the person said, no, I definitely want executive coaching, and they're not staying in coach mode, they really are, they're not being coached, then I am not serving them. And so that would, I would just go back to that. I'm not feeling comfortable going forward, and I can help you find another. I would help possibly find another resource for the person. And that said, going back to, if it is, well, I'm really having trouble getting out of my head, or if that's an issue, a coaching issue, would it be helpful to be coached on that? Make it invitational, and definitely up to the client to lead. It may be just that. She needs coaching around that. Since she expressed different goals, executive and becoming a coach, you could ask her which goal is she working on in the moment? Exactly. Thank you. We need to follow through. The follow through is so important. Ask her if that is the one she desires to work on at the time. Her defining the choices. Right on. But my contract was not to be observed for coaching purposes. It was an executive coaching, so I would be contravening the contract if I was just allowing the observation and not actually coaching her. Andrea says, I had to express my concern when a client continued to shift the focus outside of a coaching agreement. Even after several reconnects on it, I finally expressed my concern that we weren't going to be able to reach her goals, and what would she like to do? It definitely helped because she took responsibility, there you go, for her own progress instead of wanting to shift that to me. Yay. And Carol said, and referred them to the appropriate source, of course. Yes, and I absolutely, and I think I just mentioned that. And I have handy within at least the local realm resources if it's virtual coaching and it's distance coaching and you don't know anybody in the in that person's area of residence, then it's a matter of partnering with them to help them maybe explore and ask some questions. How might you find out? Who could it be? What do you need? What's going to best serve you? Tammy's asking, would I offer to mentor her if that's what she really wanted at the time? If that's a service that I provided, it could be a possibility. It could be a possibility, as long as we're really clear that it's not a conflict of interest. That, let's say my mentoring fee is higher than my coaching fee. And, as a coach, ethically, I'm not going to try to steer business over to that realm. However, if in the spirit of helping that client, it's one of the hats I wear, it may very well be that, I, how would you find a mentor? And the person might ask, could you be a mentor? And yes, it's in my business services. Or I might say, it is within, if the client has clearly said, yeah, coaching is not for me, I'm going to look for a mentor. Then it's clear that I'm not leading. It's a service I'm offering, standing in service to help that client get where she wants to be. Yeah. Having difficult conversation does not have to be an attack. Right on, Jim. But it does have to take place. And it can be getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, as was mentioned earlier. The foundation is mutual respect and mutual purpose. Oh, beautifully put. Juanita, if she chooses coaching, that gives the door to have her return to coaching with you when she is ready for executive coaching. Yep, boundary set in a loving way. Oh yeah, so important to put that heart in it. That's part of who we are and how we show up, standing in service as coaches. So the insist, I can say you can do this all directly and in a way that it's going to land. We are really well positioned as coaches to communicate really effectively. I'm going to speak to that in a moment. But in a way that, insistence doesn't have to mean aggressive. With volume and all that's involved in that energy charge, assertively communicating this to the client. Any questions before we leave this and shift into the next realm? Okay, Marianne is asking, can we move from the example to the topic of boundaries? Yeah, and the boundary setting around this was really in the context of coaching agreement. And I'm just going to quickly share, given that comment, Marianne, thank you, is, there may be a place for us to set the boundary in the moment and inform and go right into the insist. And I once fired a client, and it was around, it was very quickly after my mom had passed, and I'd gone in about a week before there was contract very shortly after, and we renegotiated for me to go in and deliver the training fairly shortly after, and there was just no wiggle room to do it, say, a week later. So it was a few days later. And in the midst of the break of the full day workshop, the person walked by me, the sponsor, and as she did, she said, I heard your energy is low today. And I had already not had some issues with the person, and I finished the contract. I finished that day. I had some, potential contracts with them. They were my biggest client at the time. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I waited a week, and then I had a conversation with the person, and basically shared, informed. You know, the comment that you made was really offensive to me, and my sense is that this just isn't a partnership that's working, and it's best to part company. And the person was like, oh, I'm sorry, there were just other things. So it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I held my boundary and just said, thank you. You know, I really want you to stay on. Thank you. My sense is this just isn't working for me. Thank you. So if I just wanted to kind of jump to that as an insist right away and giving that as an example. Juanita says, would you say we statements to go with insist like I statements go with inform? Yes, I and or we are great as long as we can stay away from you statements as much as we can, because you can be accusatory, right? We've got to be really careful for sure with the way we deliver it, put it that way. It can carry a tone, even if we don't mean to. So was that last, I'm hoping that last example was helpful to share just up front quickly around a boundary, and especially something so on the extreme end of the spectrum of firing a client. And how to set up a boundary when the client won't get honest, open up, trust you despite all efforts to build trust. It would be a challenge to continue with this person if you feel you can be of service. Okay. And Lana's posing that question. And so if the person isn't opening up, then it is just having that honest conversation with them. And maybe it's not even a boundary setting, maybe setting up a boundary, but maybe it's having the conversation with them if it's a great match, you know? It's not like how can I say, it's in the moment, just being authentic, sharing what you're noticing, and asking them, like, are they comfortable? It may be that they share that it's the space they're in and it's really helping. We sense that they're not really trusting us and opening up, but they're opening up more than they ever have. I'm going to get to a couple more comments here and then we're going to move on, just in the interest of time, to make sure we cover everything else on the slides. Sounds like that a comment could be a concern. Curious why it's crossed as a boundary. And I'm just wondering, Keisha, exactly, could you elaborate a little bit more about that? And Lana saying it can't be of service. Oh, thanks. And that says, thank you for sharing the example where I held my ground, even when it cost your client relationship. That was clarifying example. Thank you. Firmly reinforcing your values, standards, emotional needs. Juanita says, respecting boundaries could be an issue that needs to be coached on. Yeah, both setting and observing. Great point. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and Kasia, if you can just elaborate a little bit more, and maybe the response will come up in the next ones. And so the comment, so you're looking for for me to clarify the comment about energy. Okay. And why it was a boundary. And so I'm just wondering specifically, what was it that I said that around that you're wondering about, the comment about energy?
Hi, Carolyn. I believe what she's speaking of was when you were talking about when the client said that your energy was lacking that day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because I've shared quite a bit and I threw that example in really quickly. So, okay, thank you for that. So the boundary, excellent. Thanks so much. So the boundary that was crossed in that moment was, you know, I've got a core value of honoring, and I felt that it wasn't honoring. And I felt in many ways before that, I shared it was the straw that broke the camel's back. So there were lots of other examples along the way, and I was planning to have a conversation. I'd been pondering if it really was a great match. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And it might not have been for somebody else, right? So it was going back to that core values, line crossed. And so I addressed it. And again, might not have bothered someone else. I waited a week to make sure it wasn't too much around the emotional charge of losing my mom and the grief. And I realized I wouldn't put up with that from anyone else at any other time. Marianne, I want to honor that. Might not speak to you though. It's just an example. Oh, and thanks so much for clarifying that, Kasha and Sandra. So 6 ways to set up and preserve your boundaries. We're going to zip through these, and elements of them have absolutely been covered so far. If we can go to the next screen, Sandra, thanks. Respecting your own time, and that is really respecting and valuing our value. It's a matter of not allowing clients to take advantage of us, our situation or schedules. And, you know, I'm wondering, is there any other way that this might be showcased, I'll say, respecting of our time with clients as a boundary? Anything surface? When a client is always showing up late. Right. Thank you, Marianne. I was going to put that out there. Glad you did. Could be a client showing up late all the time. Yeah. Or even tending to, and maybe not meaning to, but maybe being coached on and going around the mulberry bush, no matter what you ask, and then bringing something up that is the key focus in as your action planning, and that may be a bit of, and then wanting coaching beyond that. Can you go longer? It's fine to bring it up in the last minute. However, if that's happening all the time and they're asking for more time, that did happen to me, then it could be just, maybe offering a longer coaching session, negotiating. But if it becomes something that's consistent, then it tends to be a boundary crosser. Yeah. Don't agree to meet them another time if they continually cancel. Right. Focused conversation, Miriam says. Tammy, if we set an hour, then do not let that time exceed it by a lot. Taking advantage of time with you, always pushing you to go longer than agreed, which I just shared. Yeah. I have a collaborator who sets up tons of meetings for unpaid work in my week. Oh boy, not showing up. Oh boy, that's when clients consistently scheduling at the last minute. This is a challenge for me. Kasia says, I'm too flexible because I don't mind rescheduling most of the time. Time is one of our most precious currencies, and it says how its manager addresses values standards, right? Late scheduling of sessions. Your time is their time too. Goal is to reach their goal, and lack of respect of time will impact the goal. Right on. Yeah. And so one way that works for me, quite honestly, I'll put out there as a tip, is connecting to my own core value of honoring my value as much as I honor the clients, and that can help me in communicating boundaries if they tend to be stepped over. Making sure I'm honoring myself. It is mutual respect, Doug says. Their time is valuable. Yeah. So is mine. I expect them to be respectful of my time as I am of theirs. It also references accountability from both, not defining what on time means. Culturally and individually, we have different definitions of what it looks like. Right. Honoring ourselves. You got it. Okay. Next slide, Sandra, please. And communicating effectively. Oh, right. And I saw an earlier comment. I think it was from Elizabeth sharing someone. Yeah, Elizabeth saying instead of communicating, she goes to radio silence and ignores. Oh boy, I can do that. It's horrible. Need to stop doing it. Not answering late night calls or emails too. Right. And so communicating effectively in a direct, clear, and complete way. And it goes with the IRI model, and as well, for sure, in general communication. It's just part of boundary setting in general. We're going to talk about communication a little bit more in the next couple of next slides as well. If we could go to those, Sandra, please. Thanks. Yeah, there we go. Staying in control. And so staying in control of our boundaries, not the person and not the relationship contract, but being very, very clear with ourselves, within ourselves, what the boundaries are. And when they're being crossed, being assertive. And so we're seeing the muscles in that picture, right? But the muscles aren't visible. That would be aggressive. Don't want to come on too strongly, or maybe, maybe it requires coming on a little strongly. But assertive versus aggressive. And how do we stand in assertiveness? What differentiates assertiveness from aggression? What are some characteristics of assertiveness? Speaking up without blame, without shame. And the intent, Anna says? I statements, right. And Lana, are you asking about the intent of this? Could you be more specific, or is that the way your assertiveness is, asking about the intent? Quiet, calm, firm, Shelley says. Yeah, openness, compassion, being firm. Assertive usually has less respect for feelings and emotions. Being direct. Yeah, a lot of people think that being direct can equate to being aggressive, and it can, but there are characteristics with that, there's a charged response, and being assertive involves being very direct. However, honoring ourselves while we're honoring the client. Carol says use of I and we, not you, right? Clear statements. Carol, assertive is clear, honest, direct communication, non-threatening. You got it. Can be firm. Absolutely. However, it's delivered in a way that it lands. They may be ticked off that you're not, that they're not getting their way, or that you're standing your ground. However, they will have been treated with respect. Clearly expressing your needs, questioning versus conflictual statements, appropriate tone. Assertiveness has compassion built into it, while aggression can damage without regard for others. Wow, yeah. Curious about others' perspectives, not just about you. Right on. Communicating without excessive tone, volume, body language reflects anger. Important to have open, authentic energy. Wow, so cool. So many great things. And Lana saying means Lana meant with aggression, sometimes our intentions are just to win, but being assertive may have a more productive intention to clarify boundaries. Beautifully put. Thanks. 180 is saying non-threatening is good. Aggressive communication is not done respectfully. It's so true. Thanks so much. It's important to ask if they are okay, if their behavior is unusual. And nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, Andrea is pointing out. Thank you. You got it. So it's a matter of connecting into that, centering, grounding ourselves in the moment so that we're clear, it's uncharged. Okay, Sandra, on to the next, please. Saying no and meaning it. Road closed. Boundary set. And this can be a difficult skill to learn, saying no, but it's essential when we are setting up boundaries at work or in life. And some people may try to manipulate, around it. But however, if it's a deal breaker and no means no, then it's a matter of standing in that assertive communication and holding your ground. And even if it's uncomfortable, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And if it is a high level of discomfort for you to say no to others, then I'm going to put out a stretch opportunity here for you to start practicing more and more, just saying no in the moment. Find those opportunities and get as comfortable as you can. There was a time in my life I wasn't. With practice, it comes. And I'm noticing people saying no can be a complete sentence. Yeah. Don't necessarily have to say sorry or explain. I have a reminder. My office says no is a complete sentence. 2 letters with 2-ton impact. Annette, woo woo. Lovely. Okay, thank you. Could we go to the next slide? Set client expectations early and consistently. Oh, so important. It can make all the difference. I mean, setting boundaries and maintaining boundaries, especially maintaining boundaries, can result in some conflict. However, that can be mitigated if we set them up and clearly share them early on. And in the coaching realm, as with the example I gave, it's like in a written agreement, share verbally what coaching is and isn't, and visit it. And outside of coaching agreements, it is just letting people know and holding on to them, holding true to them. Um, stay your ground if it's important to you. Negotiate compromise if it's a boundary that, and be flexible if it is one that you feel can be. But if it's a deal breaker, hold true to what you know you need for yourself. And if we can go to the next one, Sandra. Be done with the guilt. Let go. So important. Never feel guilty around holding a boundary that you know to be aligned with who you are, the core values, your standards, the emotional needs that you have. You are the best judge of you. And it's just a matter in those moments of when they're crossed, calling on some of the aspects that we've covered today. Hopefully you've got some new tips, techniques, approaches in your toolkit, or maybe it was a refresher around how to set and maintain those boundaries. I'm going to hand it over for a couple of questions and then to Sandra, but I just want to wrap up by saying I don't often have instances where boundaries are crossed. I was pondering that to give examples. And for this, and I thought, when has somebody really crossed a boundary? And I've had to really address it and insist. And not very often and not for a long time. And part of that, I feel, is that I've become very comfortable with establishing and clearly sharing it up front and being really assertive and honoring myself as well as honoring them. And so part of the takeaway, I hope, is that being proactive helps set them, that helps maintaining them. So I thank everyone so much. And I'm just going to ask for a couple of questions and then throw it over to Sandra.
So Max is asking us, he joined us a little bit late, what is boundaries defined again? Are you able just to do a very brief explanation of the definition of boundaries?
Yeah, so the boundaries defined would be, it's setting a line that you know that is aligned with your core values, basically your core values and emotional needs for sure, and standards, but who you are and what ignites you authentically. And that really informs what's important for you. You set a boundary, and that in turn sets the stage for people to know how to show up in behaviors that are going to be aligned with an ideal, healthy relationship with you. It's all about hopefully optimizing healthy relationships. They can feel really, or some people sense they're restrictive, but they really can set up healthy relationships in work and in life.
No, that's great. For me, boundaries are just a massive thing that I have had to learn, especially since becoming a mom. That's been my biggest growing point with it, and practicing every day of just kind of, being assertive and being firm, just to kind of keep the peace in the house as well. So boundaries kind of hit us in all different areas of our life. So it's such a great topic, and I very much appreciate you going through it today. We've had a great food for thought question posed in the chat, was that how have your boundaries changed given our current COVID situation? And I think for a lot of people, we probably have noticed a little bit of flexibility in the sense of, you know, what we need to manage on a daily basis regarding our boundaries when it comes to, you know, everything that's going on in the world right now. So it's a great coaching question.
If I can just jump in really, really quickly with a response to that. And man, my boundaries have been really challenged with it. And I'll just say, and my experience with other people is that's been the case. And you've got people who are really comfortable being risk takers. And you've got people who are really, really comfortable, you know, staying as safe as possible in any situation, not even wanting to put a big toe in the cold water. And so that for me, I'm kind of a little risk averse. And so I'd be the type to have disinfectant and everything. I could overdo it. And my sweet husband, who's given me permission to share, you know, is more laid back, and he's taking it seriously for sure. But I could be overprotect, and he could be, maybe, my view, maybe under not protecting, but maybe not as diligent as I am around certain things. Okay. Am I divorcing? No. Or we're agreeing to disagree. And so communication, that direct, clear communication on both our parts. Remember I said there's a place for negotiating compromise? There is. That's part of it. And if not, whether it's work or life, then you do have a decision to make, and setting up new boundaries. It's an opportunity for boundary setting.
It definitely is. And there's been a question coming up about with the COVID situation. This is kind of personal to you and your business, Carolyn. Have you been more flexible when it comes to time and payment schedules with clients?
Have I been, sorry,
more flexible when it comes to time and payment schedules with clients?
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Big business question.
That's a great question. I've been very flexible. I've been very flexible with my boundaries around time, space, payments. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I've seen it in the world. We're in this together. We're going to help ourselves through it together. So to the degree I'm an entrepreneur, for sure, I want my business to run and be successful. And part of that is knowing where the boundary is, where I can be that flexible. And part of the boundary is being client oriented and helping my clients through this as I'm being helped by others through this. For sure.
That's a great point. Thank you. We're going to move on just to see a little bit about what's coming up. So why Coaching Out of the Box? We are an ICF approved training provider. Our programs provide you with approved coach-specific training hours, or ACSTH. We do live distance education. You're on Zoom right now. You've mastered the technology. We are a very cost-effective program. We are a proven training provider for coach training, and you are lucky enough to have ongoing support. Once you're a member of the Coaching Out of the Box community, you are a member for life. So whether it's before your training, during your training, after your training, we are always here to help you along the way and answer any questions that you have and provide the support that you need. And depending on where you are in your coaching journey, we do have programs for you. If you're just wanting to kind of dip your toes in and see what coaching is all about, you can check out our 555 coaching skills training program. If you're ready to take the plunge and become an ICF credential coach, I would certainly recommend our Fast Track to ICF credential program. If you're already a credential coach and are looking for CCEs to put towards your renewal, we can help you with that as well. So please be sure to reach out at any time. And here are just a few courses that are coming up for us, as well as a link to the calendar and email address for us as well. So we have very, very much appreciated you all joining us today. And Carolyn, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was a hard webinar for me because boundaries are something that I do struggle with. So I've learned so much personally, and I very much appreciate you putting in the time and the effort to deliver us some great content today. Thank you very much. Do you have any last words?
Oh, thank you. The pleasure has been mine. I guess one last thing to leave you with, just a reminder, saying no to others is saying yes to ourselves.
That's a great one. Thank you.
Go well. Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.